The next tip to keep in mind when you're designing your components is to try and minimize the information you actually need to store in state, period. So not just within one component, what needs to be state versus maybe what needs to be state in the parent, not just distributing the state, but what actually needs to be stored in state at all. So here's a simple example. If we had a to-do list or a task list where we're storing to-dos in an array in state, we obviously need to have that in state. It's going to change. We want it to trigger re-renders. That's important. But if we wanted to display how many tasks you had left that were not done yet, it would be very easy to put that in state. Num to-dos, set num to-dos equals use state. We could initialize it at 2 if we knew there were 2 at the beginning. But anyway, we could update this every time a new to-do was added. We could have a function add to-do. We would set to-dos and put the new to-do text, and we would increment set num to-dos. We would increment the number of to-dos, display that. But we can easily derive how many to-dos are left. We can count them. It's just the length of to-dos. That's simple. If our structure was more complex and we had to-dos that were actually objects and they had a to-do text like wash car, but they also had priority maybe, high, medium, low, and completed, true or false. Are they checked off yet or are they undone? We still wouldn't need to store how many to-dos have been done or how many are left undone. We could still derive that from the to-dos array. We could just filter over it and count how many things are done or not done, how many things have a priority of high. We can easily figure that information out, and it's much better to minimize what we put in the state. Remember that it's not that state is horribly expensive. The very act of reserving state just to store an integer, it's not a big deal. But changes in state will lead to re-renders. And there are ways to get around that. There are ways to say, actually, I don't want you to re-render this component, Mr. React or Mrs. React, but that requires work and it clutters up our components. So there's no need to store something that we can easily derive in state when we can just figure it out based off of another piece of state. So think about that as you design your components. What do I actually need to put in state versus what can I figure out based off of the state or based off of props? One more example back on Instacart. There's a shopping cart checkout widget thing on the right-hand side here, and there are a couple things that definitely need to be in state, namely the products. What are we actually getting, and how many of each? What's the price? The name, that sort of stuff. There's got to be an array somewhere of products. Each product will have probably an ID, a URL, a price, dimensions or count or whatever you want to call that. 3 ounces of cat food, 12 ounces of bacon. There's also quantity, price, regular price, sale price. All that stuff needs to be stored in state somewhere, not for every single item, but there needs to be state that's tracking what is actually in my cart. But we don't need to track the total price. We can easily figure that out. We can derive that based off of what's already in the cart. We can sum every item in here, multiply it by the quantity, sum that together, there's our total. If we wanted to know how many total items we were getting, same thing. We could easily just add those together using a little looping over, using some array function. We can calculate that. That doesn't need to be in state. Same thing like this coupon price or the discount that's being displayed. If we have the original price and the current price, just subtract them. That's going to give you that discount. You don't need to calculate that and store it in state. That's not going to change, first of all, most likely, at least not very frequently. But also you can derive it from the other pieces of information, which might change. The current price might change, although I don't think the price will ever change while I'm logged into the app. I think if anything, it only changes when I reload the page. And who knows? I think it's fake anyway. I don't really trust Instacart's prices. They inflate everything. Anyway, try and minimize state. That is a very important and easy to keep in mind concept or tip when you're defining your components. Just ask yourself, do I really need this in state? If the answer is yes, don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid to use it. But if the answer is no, then do not put it in state and just derive it in another way.